The Omnibot 2000. It was the most expensive holiday wishbook catalog toy for kids of the 1980s. Omnibot came with the promise of being your humble, high-tech butler and servant. Having your own personal house butler robot in 1984 is pretty much peak 80s, but is there any way that he can possibly live up to our collective childhood imaginations? Let's find out. Hello friends, Dan from Slashdance, new album out, new music video out. If you like goth and industrial rock, this record was made just for you. Also, every week I get into fun nostalgia items that are slightly off the beaten path. So if any of this sounds good to you, please consider subscribing, hitting the bell notification, and we can do it again in the future when hopefully there's even more robots. Now maybe a lot of you are like me and owning any Omnibot was just way out of reach, let alone an Omnibot 2000. But that curiosity stuck with me for well over 30 years as I had never even seen one in person until this fella rolled into my life. So let's take a look at what he can do. Launched in 1984 by Tomy in Japan, the Omnibots were a family of robots ranging from the $10 Dingbot to the $65 Verbot, all the way to their mid-range but still expensive Omnibot at $250. The line was successful enough that in 1984, a Tomy representative claimed that they'd already sold more robots than had been sold in the entire history of robotics. And at the top of the line was this guy, the Omnibot 2000, priced at a mind-boggling $600 in 1985. In 2020 money, that's over $1,400 US. Now, just to give you a little perspective, G.I. Joe's Ultimate playset, the USS Flag, was a steal at $109. Or at $89 at launch in 1987, you could have bought 6 Nintendo Entertainment Systems for the price of one Omnibot 2000. This is Omnibot's remote control, and as you would expect, it allows you to control him remotely. All the buttons are on the front control panel except for one that's placed sort of similar to a walkie-talkie, and that's because, well, that's pretty much exactly what it is. On the lower right, you'll find a button that's labeled Omnibot Sounds, which when you press it makes, you guessed it, Omnibot Sounds. And that goes across the board. Almost all of his functions are just a single button to turn the eyes off, turn it back on, same button. Head goes left and right. There's a turn right button and a turn left button. But there's something to be said for that sort of simplicity because it actually is really fun to use. The directional pad lets you control his movement backwards and forwards, as well as rotate him. Apparently, they had to modify the North American versions to go over shag carpet, which they actually promoted as that was a legitimate concern in 1984. Also, pets love them. What? Omnibot also has 2 plastic handles so you can carry him away from your pets. Taking a look around back, there's a panel you can open to get to his rechargeable battery. Taking a look a little bit lower, there's a drawer for you to keep whatever you need your Omnibot to store. Maybe his AC adapter. Where on his chest panel, you can find a clock, a radio tuner, and the on-off switch. Some of you may know Tomy Takara as the original creators of the Transformers toys. So in keeping with that tradition, here is yet another 80s robot whose chest you can open up and stick a cassette into. Now while I'd like to just pop one of these in the spirit of avoiding a YouTube copyright strike, I'm going to have to find a way to get this onto this. Does anybody remember these specific tapes? The Fuji Extra Slim. Like their main marketing selling point was the slimnicity of the case, which I don't really remember being that big a problem, but as much as it pains me to destroy this 30-year-old packaging, this cassette was meant for a purpose, and we gotta do what we gotta do. Notice that the lights in his eyes strobe to the beat? That's pretty cool. One of the biggest selling points was this serving tray and that you could control his arm, so let's see how that works. You can use the directional pad to move his arm forward, backwards, and rotate the hands, which will rotate 360 degrees. To control the claws, there's a finger open and a finger close button. I absolutely love the sound of his servo motors. He sounds like RoboCop. And let's just say, for example, you're someone who actually puts servo motors all over their industrial album. I almost can't help but think maybe there's a collaboration here waiting to happen. The tray is actually pretty rad how it works. There's 4 holders and you put a drink in one and glasses in the other. There's a button here on the tray, and when Omnibot opens its claw, it hits the button, which makes the glasses and drinks rotate. When a bottle reaches this circle, Omnibot is in position to pick up the bottle and ready to pour it into the next available glass. My friends and I were actually pretty impressed how well this worked the first time we saw it, but on the other hand, it is about 8 million times easier to get your own drink. Still, I think it's pretty neat. Tomy advertised a number of optional accessories for Omnibot, such as light and sound sensors and even a vacuum attachment, but sadly, none of these came to be. In the end, there was only about 10,000 Omnibot 2000s produced. And yeah, maybe he doesn't really live up to the promise of
impress your teacher, impress your girlfriend.
And maybe he's really just an RC car, radio cassette deck, armatron, walkie-talkie, and strobe lights, all wrapped in a fancy shell. But to me, he's a lot of fun, and he just completely fascinates everyone who comes into contact with him. I guess his place in history is really just a curiosity for those of us who couldn't afford him, and the ultimate icon of toy excess in the 1980s. So, did you or anyone you know actually own an Omnibot 2000 or any Omnibot for that matter back in the 1980s? Let me know in the comments below. Also, I hope that you'll subscribe because I'm going to be back here next week with another retro gem, and it sure would be cool if you were too. Regardless, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. I love y'all, and I'll see you next week.